Welcome to the 5th video in the Outdoor Women Lead series, a collaborative project between Women for Healthy Rural Living and Maine Outdoor School. I'm Hazel Stark from Maine Outdoor School, and today we're going to learn some canoeing basics. Do you have an old canoe hanging around, but you've never really learned how to confidently use it? If so, then this video is for you. If you're looking to buy a canoe, it's important to know that there are a few different types. First, there are aluminum canoes, which you can get pretty inexpensively, and they're quite sturdy, but they're also pretty heavy. Second is you can get plastic canoes, like this one. These ones do a good job if you hit a rock. They tend to glide right over a rock. Aluminum, on the other hand, can stick to rocks, which can be pretty annoying. And then the third sort of category of canoes are lightweight canoes made out of Kevlar or fiberglass, which are really good if you're doing long-distance canoe trips and you're needing to portage or carry your canoe and stuff over obstructions like waterfalls or dams. So before you head out canoeing, whether it's your first time or you're a seasoned canoeist, there are a few things you need to have. One, of course, is a canoe. Second is a life jacket that is fitted to you. Third is a paddle that is also fitted to you. You also should have a whistle so you can alert somebody if you have a problem, or if you see a boat coming towards you that doesn't see you, you can try to let them know where you are. You should also have a light, like a headlamp, in case fog rolls in or it gets late so that you're able to signal or find your way back home. You should have a map of the area where you're going to be traveling. And you should also definitely leave a float plan with somebody who's back on shore, which just says where you're going, when you plan to be back, and a plan for how you'll communicate with them once you're safely back ashore. The other things to have that'll help you stay comfortable, especially if something goes wrong and you're out longer than expected, are bringing extra food and water with you. And also, it's a really good idea, no matter how long of a trip you're doing, but especially if you're in cold waters like Maine has pretty much year-round, is to take some kind of waterproof bag, whether that's an official dry bag or a big gallon-sized Ziploc bag, where you put an extra set of warm clothes in it. So if you do fall in the water, you have dry, warm clothes to change into. So before we head off today, you've probably noticed that I'm sitting in this canoe backwards. So let's talk about how to distribute weight in a canoe before you head out onto the water. First, getting into a canoe, it's important to keep your weight towards the center line of the canoe and keep it really low. That'll prevent it from rolling over. If you're carrying a lot of stuff, you want to pretty evenly distribute that with the most of the weight towards the back or the back of the middle. If you're paddling tandem or with another person and both of you have a similar skill level in paddling, the heavier person should generally go in the stern or the back of the boat. That means that the bow or the front won't get too weighed down and drive into waves. If, however, the lighter person is the more competent paddler, they need to go in the back because they're going to be the one doing the steering. If that's the case, you'll want to put some extra weight up in the back with that lighter person to make up for the extra weight by the heavier person in the front. If you're a woman traveling with a male paddling partner, often women are lighter than men, and the men end up almost always taking the back of the boat. But the unfortunate thing with that is that women don't often get to practice as much of their steering skills, which happen from the back of the boat. So it's a good idea to know how to switch places, add that extra weight in the back with you so that you both can build to equal paddling skill levels. If you're going to be soloing a canoe or paddling it by yourself, it's important to either have extra weight in the bow of the canoe so it doesn't pop up too high. That can be a problem because if it gets windy, it can really move you around on the water, which can be really annoying. Another way of dealing with that is by, instead of sitting in the stern seat, which is as close to one end as possible, you sit in the bow seat backwards, which is what I'm doing right now. That brings my weight a little bit more towards the middle of the canoe, and I don't have to worry quite so much about adding extra weight in the stern, or the bow in this case. It's important to have a paddle that's fitted to your size, and there's a couple of ways to figure out what size paddle you need. The first way is, if you're sitting in a canoe, to be able to measure the distance between your nose and the water line. If you can't measure in a canoe, you can always kneel on a floor at home, keeping your butt about 6 inches from the floor, and then measure the distance between the floor and your nose. That distance should be the length of the shaft of your paddle. So you can see for me, sitting in this canoe, the length of the water line to my nose is just about the length of the shaft of the paddle. Once you have a paddle that's your size, then you need to learn how to use it. So the first step in learning how to use a paddle is learning how and where to hold it. So you want to have one hand on the top of your grip and the other hand as far down the shaft as you can get it. If you keep your hands close together, that's going to make you really tired when you're paddling because that's not efficient at all. If you keep your hands spread out as much as possible, you're able to paddle a lot more comfortably, a lot more effectively for longer. The first basic paddle stroke to get to know is the power stroke. This is the most common stroke and the one especially useful if you're in the bow or the front of the canoe. For the power stroke, you simply need to hold your canoe paddle in the usual way, keep that shaft as vertical as possible, and move the blade of the paddle through the water from front to back, keeping the water covering most of the blade from front all the way to back. Where the power stroke allows you to go forward and backward really effectively, a pry or a draw can help you move side to side. So to do a draw, you simply move that paddle perpendicular to where you had it for the power stroke and pull or draw that water towards you. That's going to help you scoot in that direction. If you want to scoot away from something, like you're noticing a rock coming up, you can do a pry or a push, where you do exactly the opposite. A really important canoe stroke to know is called the J stroke. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's a really important one because it saves you a lot of energy. If you are power stroking on one side of the canoe, if you're in the stern, you're going to notice that your canoe is going to go off to one side. And you might want to just switch your paddle to the other side to start trying to get it to go in a straight line again. But all that motion of the paddle on either side of the canoe takes a lot of energy. So the J stroke helps you save energy by allowing you to stay paddling on one side of the canoe. So the way to do a J stroke is to start off like you're doing a normal power stroke. But just as you start getting closer to your hips, you start turning your top thumbs down, to make your paddle blade be up and down in the water. And then, just before you would take your paddle out of the water, you flick the paddle out a little bit before taking it out, making a J shape. That J motion helps correct for your boat going off to one side and helps it stay in a straight line. One really important thing to know about the J stroke is only the person in the stern, the back of the boat, should be doing the J stroke because they have the control over the direction of the boat. If the person in the bow starts doing the J stroke, your canoe is not going to follow what you want it to do. Canoeing allows us to see places we would never be able to see on foot, and it also allows us to travel almost silently, allowing us to see a huge variety of wildlife. In Maine, we're pretty lucky that we can usually find pretty inexpensive paddles, canoes, and all the other supplies that you need to get out on the water. So hopefully this video encourages you to get out paddling. Thank you for tuning in to the OWL series with Women for Healthy Rural Living and Maine Outdoor School. Be sure to check out the OWL website where you can see more videos, a blog for women, and lots of other resources.